and welcome to Keen on Keys. This time I want to show you how to sample the Casio PT-87. I explained all the features and showed how to add an output in my last video. And if you haven't seen it yet, you might watch it first. I'm going to use Native Instruments Kontakt, but any other sampler should do the job as well. Connect the PT-87 to your audio interface and turn it on. The first thing to do is to check out if the keyboard is in tune. There's a tuning pot at the bottom side. Don't use something made of metal to turn it, otherwise the tone wouldn't be stable. I used this piece of plastic, it's from an old credit card. Choose a sound with no decay and no vibrato, like the organ. It's also a good idea to check the tuning range. From the lowest F, it goes down to a B. That's 6 half steps. And from the highest C, it goes up to an E. That's 4 half steps. Not bad. We will need that later. I bring it back to the right tune. Now we are ready for sampling. The easiest and quickest way would be to sample a single note, for example the middle C, and pitch it up and down. Let's try the piano. This piano sound fades out very quickly. Just record the whole sound from beginning to end. I prefer to cut the sample in my recording software, but it's also possible to change the start and end points in Kontakt. Save it to a separate folder and name it Piano. Now the sample is ready. Open Kontakt and open the browser. Navigate to your samples folder and drag and drop the sample into the large window. The blue keys indicate that the sample is spread over the whole keyboard. But by default, it's looped. Click on the wrench in the top right corner and open the wave editor. Turn off the loop function and the piano is ready to play. If I open the mapping editor, we can see this yellow box. It's called the sample zone, and it represents the key and velocity range. This yellow key is the root key, and it's always the middle C by default. You can change the key range by dragging the left and right border. This is the original key range, but I guess it's 1 octave higher. The sampled C sounds exactly the same. But if you listen closely, you can hear that the lowest C is a little bit dull and too long. The highest C is too short. We can adjust the length with the loop function. Turn on the loop again. Switch on Snap Loop to zero crossing first. The loop should start right after the attack phase and end before the fade out begins. If I zoom in, you can see that in between the loop, the waveform doesn't change. That's how it should be. Otherwise, the loop could be noticeable. Search for a recognizable point like this upward peak and try to find the same point at the end of the loop. The loop is perfect. But it doesn't sound like the piano anymore. We have to turn off the sustain and turn up the decay a little, about 2 milliseconds. The length is okay now, but we lost the original fade out, which was more like a stairway. And the lower keys still sound too dull and the upper keys a little bit too harsh. To get the right sound on every key, we need more samples. But it's not necessary to sample every key. 1 key per octave could be enough. I usually sample every third note. The PT-87 has 32 keys, so I need 11 samples. I can add some more by tuning it 6 half steps down and 4 half steps up. And if I pitch every sample a half step up and down, I will get 44 keys total. That's 3.5 octaves, 1 octave more than the original keyboard. Let's record the piano again. This takes a little, so I will cut it short. Here we have the 15 samples, all in the right order. I save all samples at once. And I name them S. They will be numbered automatically. If you drag all the samples over, Kontakt will map them. But the mapping doesn't fit in this case. Kontakt is only able to do this right when the names of the samples contain note informations. But it takes more time to rename all the samples than to do the mapping manually. We start with a B, followed by a D, and so on. When you're ready, expand the regions 1/2 step up and down. It's possible to turn off the loops for all samples at once. Select all zones, turn off the loop, and use the function Copy current zone's loop settings. And when you're done, the piano is ready to play. If you want it to sound more like the original, you can tweak it a little. Turn off the velocity and try to match the release. And the best thing is, if you want to sample more than one sound, you don't have to do the mapping over and over again. Just save this sound as a template. Use the save mode, patch and samples. That way the samples are saved in a separate folder. The template is ready, but don't forget to save the sound again as piano. For my finished patches, I prefer to use the monolith style, with patch and samples in a single file, just because this way Kontakt will always find the samples connected to the patch immediately, even if you change their location on the hard drive. Now you can delete the samples over here, and also the samples in the template folder. Record another sound. Let's try the organ. This sound doesn't fade out, so I recorded just a short sample. If we have a look at the waveform, we see a short attack and the release phase. In between, the waveform stays the same, so it will be easy to get a good loop. Now we can record the other 14 samples, cut, save and loop them, just like we did with the piano sample. But as you can imagine, setting the loop points for 15 samples can take a lot of time. It's not always as easy as in this example. There are some tools that may help you, like the find loop end function, or the loop editor. But if you don't like editing and if you can't wait to play your sampled instruments, you may prefer another approach. When it comes to sounds like organ, flute, violin, trumpet, all the sounds with a sustained phase, I sometimes record longer samples, instead of looping them afterwards. Usually about 8 seconds. That should be enough for most situations. I set the tempo to 120 beats per minute and turn on the metronome. Hold down every key for 4 bars. When you're done, save the new samples to the template folder. Remember, this template was made without loops. Use the same name as before. In this case, it's S. Open up the template and the organ is ready to play. Make adjustments for release if needed. And save the sound as organ. This method takes a bit more space in your hard drive, and the sounds are not as flexible as the looped ones, but it takes less time. Now you can go on and sample the rest of the sounds. And by the way, if you start a ROM-pack tune, the automatically selected melody voice could be slightly different from the manually selected voice. For example, the flute in Greensleeves has no vibrato. Sampling the drum sounds is very easy. Play back the rhythms at slowest tempo and record it. Not every pattern contains different sounds. Rock, swing and samba will be enough. We have 6 different sounds. Cut, save and map them as needed. I prefer the general MIDI standard, with bass drum on C1, snare drum on D1, hi-hat closed on F sharp, hi-hat open on A sharp, low tom on F, and high tom on A. Don't forget to turn off the loop. You can expand the regions to get a lower bass drum, for example. And it's possible to adjust tune, pan, and volume for each sample individually. It's more difficult to sample the bass sound. In most of the rhythms, the bass plays simultaneously with the drums, but I found one single bass note in the samba rhythm. Record its slowest tempo. And here it is. I recorded a few more notes from different Rompact tunes, and I was finally able to get all 13 possible bass notes and to create a patch. The bass sound is quite short, so I created another patch with loops. To sample the chords is even more difficult. There's also one rhythm pattern that provides a free chord. It's the swing 4 beat. But I need to sample much more chords than bass notes. There are major, minor, seventh and even diminished chords. A look at the manual shows which chords are played in the 4 Rompact tunes. We have C major, F major, G major, D minor, D7 and G7 in D Lorelei. A and E minor and E7 in Greensleeves. And D diminished in Old Folks at Home. That's not much. To get more chords, I need another Rompact. And I happen to have one that was shipped with my MT800, the RO201 with 15 songs. I managed to get most of the chords, but it took quite a long time. I had to record all the songs at the slowest tempo and then cut out the chords. The first octave is for the major chords, the second for the seventh, the third for the minor, and the last for the diminished chords. And finally I sampled the rating sounds and the startup sequence. All I've shown you was really just basic stuff. And if you want to maintain the original character of the keyboard, that's all you need. A few aspects are more difficult to sample. For example, the behavior of some sounds when played legato. The attack is different. There are some functions, like the legato mode, to achieve a similar behavior. And there's also a possibility to get this with polyphonic sounds. But I haven't found something really satisfying yet. If I do so, I will show it in one of my next videos. But now I have the 8 voices, the drum sounds, the bass, chords and effects. I can play all the voices polyphonic on larger keys and build my own rhythms and accompaniments. I can tweak the sounds a little bit by changing attack, decay and release, or create a loop for a longer sustain, if I want to turn the celesta into a synth lead, for example. And it still sounds like the PT-87. Of course, you can use all kinds of effects your sampler or recording software offers. But I like to keep it simple. Usually I only add a little bit EQ, panning, reverb, delay, and sometimes chorus to enhance the mix. That's it. Let's see what we can do with it. I prepared a few examples. These are the short versions. You can listen to the full versions on Bandcamp or SoundCloud. I will put a link in the description. The first example is a little bit like a romback tune. A simple accompaniment with drums, bass and chords and a few monophonic melodies on top. I've used volume and panning, an EQ on drums and bass, some reverb and a tiny little bit of delay on the melody. That's it. The second example has a few more tracks and some polyphonic sounds. Again, some EQ, reverb and delay, and I added a chorus on the violin and a compressor on the drums. The last example has far more tracks and some effects that really change the sound, like this filter plugin on the violin, which modulates the sounds over 8 bars, a distortion on the lead voice, and a lot more EQ on the drums. I added the click from the rating sound and created a crash cymbal out of the open hyatt. And I mixed two sounds to create a kind of synth brass. Now I'll leave you alone with this last song, and I hope you like it. Thanks for watching.